Imagine it's 4 a.m. on a quiet Wednesday morning in March 1979. Most of America is fast asleep. But in a control room on a small island in Pennsylvania, a series of blinking lights and wailing alarms are signaling the start of the most serious nuclear accident in U.S. history. This is the story of 3 Mile Island Unit 2, a near disaster that would forever change the public's perception of nuclear power. The day began like any other at the 3 Mile Island Nuclear Generating Station, located on the Susquehanna River. The plant's two pressurized water reactors, Unit 1 and Unit 2, were humming along, generating electricity for hundreds of thousands of homes. Unit 2, the newer of the two, had only been online for 3 months. But deep within its complex system of pipes and pumps, a small, routine maintenance issue was about to spiral out of control. It started with a minor problem in the plant's secondary, non-nuclear loop. A pump that fed water to the steam generators stopped working. This was a fairly common issue, and backup pumps were designed to kick in automatically, and they did. But there was a hidden problem. A set of valves connecting these backup pumps had been mistakenly left closed after maintenance 2 days earlier. This was a critical violation of safety rules. It meant that no water was reaching the steam generators. Without a constant flow of water, the steam generators quickly began to boil dry. Think of it like a pot left on a hot stove with no water in it. The temperature and pressure inside the primary system, the part containing the nuclear reactor core, started to climb rapidly. Just as it was designed to do, the reactor automatically shut down or scrammed in less than 10 seconds. Control rods dropped into the core, halting the nuclear chain reaction. At this point, the immediate danger of a runaway reaction was over. But the reactor core was still incredibly hot. Even after a shutdown, radioactive decay continues to produce a tremendous amount of heat, known as decay heat. This heat must be constantly removed to prevent the core from overheating and melting. This is where the cooling system is absolutely vital. To relieve the mounting pressure, a special valve at the top of the reactor's pressurizer, called a pilot-operated relief valve, automatically opened. Pressure began to drop. The system was programmed to close this valve once the pressure returned to a safe level. A light on the control panel went off, indicating to the operators that the signal to close the valve had been sent. And this is where the real trouble began. The operators believed the valve had closed, but it hadn't. It was stuck open. Now, superheated radioactive water was pouring out of the reactor system through this stuck-open valve. It was like a massive, invisible leak. The operators in the control room were flying blind. They had a single light that told them the valve was supposed to be closed, but no instrument to confirm its actual position. They were facing a loss of coolant accident, the very scenario every nuclear engineer dreads. But their instruments were telling them a completely different, dangerously misleading story. As coolant gushed out, the pressure in the reactor system continued to fall. To compensate, the emergency core cooling system automatically activated, pumping high-pressure water into the reactor. This was the correct and necessary response to a loss of coolant. But the operators, confused by their instruments, made a fateful decision. They saw the water level in the pressurizer rising. They feared the system was becoming solid, completely filled with water, which could damage equipment. So, they manually throttled back the emergency cooling pumps. They were actively starving the reactor of the very water it desperately needed to stay cool. For the next several hours, the situation in the control room was one of utter confusion. Alarms were blaring, and over 100 lights were flashing. The operators were overwhelmed with conflicting and confusing data. They were trained to handle specific single-failure events, but they were now dealing with a cascade of multiple, simultaneous failures, both mechanical and human. They simply didn't understand that the core was being uncovered and was starting to melt. Meanwhile, the radioactive water that had escaped through the stuck valve was filling up a quench tank. When that tank overflowed, sump pump automatically kicked on and began moving the contaminated water into an auxiliary building outside the main containment structure. This is how radioactivity began to escape into the environment. It took nearly 2.5 hours for a new shift of operators to come in and correctly diagnose the problem. They realized the relief valve was stuck open and closed a backup valve to finally stop the leak. But by then, the damage was done. For over 2 hours, the top portion of the nuclear core had been uncovered, exposed to extreme temperatures. The zirconium alloy cladding on the fuel rods had reacted with the high-temperature steam, producing hydrogen gas. A significant portion of the core, about half of it, had melted. As the day dawned, news of the incident at 3 Mile Island began to spread. The plant's owner, Metropolitan Edison, initially downplayed the severity of the situation. But as officials from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC, arrived on site, a much grimmer picture emerged. The biggest fear now was a large bubble of hydrogen gas that had collected at the top of the reactor vessel. Experts were concerned that this bubble could either interfere with restarting the flow of coolant, or, in a worst-case scenario, ignite and breach the reactor vessel itself. The media latched on to the hydrogen bubble story, stoking public fear of a catastrophic explosion. Pennsylvania's Governor Dick Thornburgh faced an agonizing decision. Based on the advice of the NRC chairman, who recommended the precautionary evacuation of pregnant women and preschooled children within a 5-mile radius of the plant. This announcement turned a local incident into a national crisis. Roads became clogged as terrified residents fled the area. The nation watched, holding its breath, as engineers worked around the clock to stabilize the reactor and eliminate the hydrogen bubble. Over the next few days, the crisis slowly de-escalated. Scientists realized that the risk of a hydrogen explosion had been overstated. There wasn't enough oxygen in the vessel for it to ignite. Using a clever technique, they were able to slowly vent the hydrogen from the system. By the end of the week, the reactor was in a stable state of cold shutdown. The immediate crisis was over, but the long-term consequences were just beginning. In the aftermath, the cleanup of 3 Mile Island Unit 2 was a monumental task. It took more than a decade and cost over $1 billion. Robotic cameras sent inside the reactor vessel revealed a scene of devastation, a partially molten, rubble-filled core. The accident, while contained, had come terrifyingly close to a much larger disaster. The impact on the nuclear industry was profound. The 3 Mile Island accident shattered public confidence in the safety of nuclear power. It led to sweeping reforms in reactor safety, operator training, and emergency response planning. The NRC mandated hundreds of safety upgrades at plants across the country. No new nuclear power plants were ordered in the United States for over 3 decades following the accident. So, what are the key takeaways from that fateful day in 1979? First, it highlighted the critical importance of the human-machine interface. The control room at TMI was a confusing maze of dials and lights that overwhelmed the operators. Modern control rooms are now designed with human factors in mind, providing clear, prioritized information. Second, it exposed massive deficiencies in operator training. They were trained for simple failures, not complex, cascading events. Training now uses advanced simulators to prepare operators for a much wider range of worst-case scenarios. And finally, it proved that even with multiple safety systems, a combination of mechanical failure, design flaws, and human error could lead to a severe accident. While no one was killed or injured, and studies have found no long-term health effects on the population, 3 Mile Island served as a powerful and costly lesson. It was a wake-up call that forced an entire industry to re-examine its approach to safety from the ground up. The legacy of those confusing, terrifying hours in 1979 is a safer, more resilient nuclear industry today, but also a public that remains deeply skeptical of the atom's power. The silent, imposing cooling towers of 3 Mile Island stand as a permanent reminder of how close we came to catastrophe. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. See you next time.